Right, typewriter.
This is your cue, Don. Go.
Don, we're live.
Welcome. Sorry for the false start there. We had a couple of difficulties, technological difficulties, but here we go. We're trying again. And so, welcome to the Deal Doctor live stream. It's Monday, and as usual on Monday, things don't always go the way we hope they would. So today I have special guest Kim Anderson with Eric and myself, and we're going to talk a little bit about wholesaling. Now, I want to just clarify before we get started that wholesaling and guaranteed sales are a little bit different. They're not the same thing. Years back, listing agents were going out and guaranteeing the sale of a house so that their buyer could go out and buy another house with a non-contingent or contingent upon the closing purchase agreement. But that was different. And I want to turn to Eric and share our conversation with Gail Anderson about what agents were required to do in that guaranteed sale sort of scenario.
Yeah, so here let's say we have a seller and an agent comes to them and they want to wholesale this, meaning they're really just trying to get the house under contract so that they can turn around and find another buyer for it. They're trying to be a middle person. So that's wholesaling is about. And as a real estate professional, you have to understand that we have a different set of guidelines that we must follow as real estate agents or associate brokers compared to the public. The public has much more leeway to do whatever the heck they want, unlike licensed agents. So what ends up happening is, let's say I come and I see Don selling a house and I'm like, well, he's old and I want to try and take advantage of him, right? So I say, here's an offer, Don. Hey, I'm going to buy your house. I'm going to get it under contract, but it's going to be contingent upon me selling it in 90 days. Well, maybe Don doesn't read the fine print. He can use my trifocals if he wants to read the fine print.
It's going to be a long day, isn't it?
It's going to be a long day. So what ends up happening is Don signs this, and now he's like, oh, someone just now took over my listing. Really, Don now is in control of who is coming and going because he's trying to find another buyer because he's now in the first position. He's locked up that listing. Now, I should say I locked up the listing with Don, right? I'm going to be the bad guy here, right? I'm taking advantage of the situation. The problem is that within the language of that purchase agreement, if it says that I'm going to close within 90 days, as a real estate professional, you have to have the funds to do so. You can't just hold a contract in an extended state without being able to perform financially. That's different than the public. If I'm a non-licensed agent and I'm just a member of the public and I come in and try to do this, I don't have to perform. I could lock that contract up for 90 days. If I don't find another buyer, guess what? Sorry, Don, you know what? Well, I wasn't able to close, so put the house back on the market. Now, this is a very basic 10,000 foot overview looking down on things. They become much more complex based on the language that's drafted in this contract that's trying to hold up a listing because they're trying to be the middle person. We have attorneys that I've seen where they come and a member of the public, again, they could be an attorney, and they say, hey, Kim, you have a listing. Here's a contract for you. And if you don't currently close with buyer one position, let's say if you have let's say Kim's selling a house, she gets an offer. They're in the middle of negotiations. They're about ready to close a week out. And the agent, let's say Kim takes a backup offer. And it's this wholesaler who's jumping in saying, hey, look, I kind of just want to get this house under contract. And they write in there saying, Kim, if you don't close on offer number one within the 14-day period that you're saying that's within that, my offer is going to take over and take precedence over your primary offer, because you're going to now be in breach of contract with this backup offer that I'm providing. It can get very complex and confusing for agents. Anytime you're under a contract and you're trying to do a backup offer, or you have someone just coming to you and saying, hey, look, I'm going to buy this offer, but I'm going to try to resell it again. And we have to be very careful, because we have to make sure that attorneys get involved. I have to just drop the mic here and be like, well, get an attorney, because these wholesalers who come and try to want to get a listing under contract with the hopes that they're going to flip it before they close, you have to read that contract and you have to explain to your seller what's just going to happen here, that you're going to be held hostage basically
Okay.
when that wholesaler is trying to perform.
So therein lies the difference between what we knew as guaranteed sales, where a listing agent or a listing agent could take the house as owner by purchase agreement and remarket the property. But if they didn't sell it to somebody else, they couldn't just throw up their hands and walk away from the deal. They had to go and close on it themselves because they were licensed agents.
Correct. As a licensed agent,
So wholesaling is a whole different sort of thing. And I want to turn to Kim, because Kim, you just had a situation recently where this wholesaling issue came up, and share what happened in your experience.
So I did, and I spent a lot of time on the phone with Don and Eric. So what happened is I put a listing. It needs some work. I posted out there as active, had it on the market all weekend. I wasn't getting the offer that I was looking for. So by Monday, I got a call from this out of town investor, and he wanted to write up an offer, and he wanted me to write the offer for him. He gave me what it was, talked to my seller. Seller said, not enough. We negotiated and we got the price that we wanted on the home. So in that case, I wrote it up, stay in the seller position, right? I'm just facilitating for the buyer, and everybody was happy. So I had this conversation with this buyer, and he gave me the impression, so I looked him up to make sure he was a legitimate LLC. He gave me the impression that he's a flipper and that he was going to buy this home. He talked about comps, what he thought he could get for it. They're going to come in and clean it all up and either flip it or make it a rental property. I can't remember which one. I had no idea what was happening. So the number was good. My seller was happy with it, and we signed, right? All good. In my case, I actually reduced my commission for my seller just to help him out. It was a cash deal, going to close in a week or two. It was good. So, so then I get a call the next day from an agent in our community, and they said, hey, Kim, do you know what's going on with your listing? I'm like, what? So that I had no idea what was going on. So when he asked me to write the offer, this investor, he said at the last minute, hey, can you make it assignable? You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I've done deals where we have to reassign it. I was thinking like one owner comes and purchases it in their name, but then I want to assign it to my LLC. And so we're just going to flip me buying it and put it into my LLC. That's where my mind was. I had no idea about any of this. And so we talked about the inspection period, the closing date. And he said, could you, because we're going to be flipping it, could you make it accessible to my contractors? Once again, I'm looking through my glasses, right? Sure, I'll let your contractors in. We had no problem with it. Then I get this call from the agent, and he said, do you know what's going on with your listing? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? He said, oh yeah, it's a wholesaler. And he's now taking control of your listing, and he's got it out on all these websites, and he's trying to resell it. And why is Eric laughing at us right now? Sorry guys, it's just Monday, but I'm trying to be serious and he's laughing. I'm missing something here. So you know, I'm on the phone with Don and Eric like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And so I'm a little embarrassed because I just got taken advantage of, and I'm a pro, right? I should know better than this. I dotted all my I's, crossed all my T's. So that was the first clue that this agent said he's out selling it out to other wholesalers. And what they do is they're trying to find a new buyer. And if they don't find one, they're at closing, they're just going to go, oh, we're not going to be able to close, keep your earnest money. And it's going to fall apart. So that made me start asking questions. I also asked for proof of funds, and I also asked for the earnest money within 48 hours. So we'll get to that in a minute, but do you guys have any more thoughts on that before we go the next step?
Well, I want to ask, when let's say that it got to the closing. I know that it didn't, but let's say that it did get to the closing. And they said, well, thanks everyone. Thanks for playing. Here's the home game. And they walk out the door and don't close, or they don't even come to the title company.
Right.
And sure, no problem, keep my earnest deposit. But it doesn't necessarily have to stop there from the seller's perspective. If the buyer is in breach of contract, are these wholesalers so, I'll use the word arrogant for lack of anything else, to think that the seller would not pursue them beyond their earnest deposit for a breach of contract and any damages incurred?
That seems to be the assumption, right? We'll just walk away. You keep $500. Now we're at the holidays. Now we've lost some, marketing power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when my eyes became aware. So then I called Don and explained what was happening, and I wasn't very comfortable with it. Then my phone started ringing more and more agents. And then I had agents calling me that wanted to get in. And I said, where were you the last 3 days? Where were you at? Because you're a good agent. I would have loved to work with you. So Don said, take backup offers. So I started taking backup offers, and I knew I had a good solid offer out there, but I needed, reason per the contract to get out from this wholesaler. So I started pressing him for, where's your earnest money? Where's your proof of funds? And that's where it got sticky. He couldn't produce that. He didn't have it. He sent me a proof of funds that said the bank name and an amount, but there was no name of his on there. Right. So that was my first clue. You don't have the money. And then he started dancing by text. Oh, I'll get your earnest money there. And that's where I started feeling really uncomfortable. And my job is to take care of my seller. And I was not getting a good feeling. And then he started wanting to get people in there to look at it. So basically he was taking over my listing had I let him, and he was wanting wholesalers to get in there and look at the property so he could resell it. The good news is he asked for a contractor code that was always, and I never gave him that. He couldn't get in that home without contacting me first. So, yeah.
And that's the proper way of doing it, because if you think about it, you are now in contract with this wholesaler. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't, although he may think that he has the right just to let anyone in and out, your seller still has to give permission to allow someone on the property. Someone just can't come on someone else's property without permission. So you really do have some protection if you hold true to that. Some people may have just given up and said, well, yeah, here's a contractor code. And then this wholesaler would have been letting people in, true buyers, and that was truly not the intent. So there was some gray areas there of what was truly happening. And really, it seemed like they were just lying, not telling the truth about who is really coming in through the property. They were calling them contractors, right?
Right.
But they were truly members of the public, investors, and others.
Yep. Yeah. So it could have been anyone. It could have been another investor who was going to take this and flip it, or it could have been, I know we ran into this recently, where a buyer, a member of the public out there who had no clue what was going on, was given one of these opportunities to buy a house on land contract with 9% interest. So we don't know what these wholesalers are doing and whether or not it even fits within the letter of the law. But I want to go back to where the road turned a bit. And he said, I want to make it assignable. Isn't that a red flag now? Shouldn't it be a red flag to all of our agents that when somebody asks for it to be assignable, that should send out all sorts of signals about, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to make this assignable, is my seller going to be able to approve that new buyer who is going to take first position. Isn't that
Right.
something that should happen?
Yes, and now I know, and that's why I wanted to do this live stream with you today. So everybody hears, you see the word assignable, you need to pick up the phone, call us, call our team, Deal Doctor Broker Support, and say, what does this mean? Because basically, he was taking over my listing. And my thought was, well, if you can get that price, I should be able to get that price. We were happy with the price that we had. It was almost full price asking, but he was marketing it and going to make a quick $5,000 or $10,000 in 30 days, right? And it just didn't feel right. And everything he was doing, he started. So once I got that call from the other agent, I started watching his timelines. And that's when I started seeing, where I may have trusted a buyer. Now I'm like, you're not producing. So I started holding him really tight. And that's when it all started to show up, was that he really didn't have the money, and he was real. Oh, and then he started sending me multiple pre-approval letters for loans. I go, wait a minute, this is a cash deal between my seller and you, your investment company. Why are you sending me loan approvals? So that's right. You have to really pay attention to what he started to do. He was obviously not a pro at this, and he didn't have any money.
So
Yeah.
if his earnest deposit, let's go down this road a little bit further. The earnest deposit was relatively small, if I'm understanding.
Yep.
And what would have, and yet this was a cash sale.
Correct.
So it wasn't cash contingent upon pulling it out of a 401k
Nope.
or selling it a house or assigning it to somebody else who actually could get a mortgage and close on it. Correct?
Right. Correct.
Until it became assignable sometime after. But when you're faced with a cash sale, isn't that a good reason to ask for a substantial earnest deposit? I mean, if they're going to close with cash in 2 to 3 weeks, what's wrong with a $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 earnest deposit? Eric, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we used to actually tell people, a minimum of 1% of the sales price. And if you have a cash buyer, it could be 10%. I mean, I don't understand why if someone is a cash buyer and they really want this home and they're going to follow the guidelines within the purchase agreement and perform, they should have no problem being able to put a large a deposit down or escrow or earnest money deposit. And if they want to terminate during inspections, okay, that's their right. But there should be no problem with at least a seller trying to ask for a larger EMD. They may say no, but it doesn't hurt to ask. But if they don't agree to that, then that might be a red flag. In this case, we had a cash buyer who truly couldn't show proof of funds.
Right.
So that's what it came down to.
Let's go back to that request that was sent shortly after the seller accepted what appeared to be a legitimate cash offer. And the buyer said, I want to make it assignable. What would you recommend to agents right at that moment? What do they do at that moment? And you said, call us. But in addition to that, isn't that something that they should say, wait a minute, stop, hold the phone. We just had a deal with you to buy this for cash, closing in 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is. And now you want to change the terms of the purchase agreement. I need to know more. Kim, would you agree?
I agree. And because this was such a lower price property, the earnest money was just short of 1%. But note taken, asked for a lot more. That 1% isn't enough on a cash deal. So yes, now I know. That's why I said there are so many things I should have picked up on that was happening here. And yes, you should stop and say, tell me more. That's a big stop right there. When they want to make it assignable, you need to find out what's going on here, because that's our clue, right?
Yeah, and I'll repeat it, if you will, just so we all remember this. How did you get out of the contract? Because you explained a little bit earlier, but remind us again how you got out of that contract.
So I called Don and I talked to Eric several times, and Don said, well, I explained it to him and he said, take backup offers. Because I said, oh, now my phone's blowing up and I have agents that want to get in and they're begging me to get in. And this was after the 3 or 4 days had been on the market. So Don said, take backup offers. So I did. We have specific language that I told them to write in there. So we made sure we did that properly. And I had several backup offers, several, not just a few. And they were well above what we were receiving. So I had to say my fiduciary responsibility is to my seller to get him the best price. And because of the vibes, it wasn't just price, the vibes of what I was getting from this other investor, I started having him follow the contract. So he had till midnight, 48 hours. And I started asking, hey, where's your earnest money? So I started pushing for earnest money, proof of funds within the timeline. And that's when his text started really going haywire, because we were getting to a deadline and he couldn't produce it.
Excellent point. So you didn't just allow a can to be kicked down the road. You
Right.
started to become very assertive and proactive about the deadlines in the contract. And we talk about this
Yep.
can kicking dynamic a lot, that agents sit back and do nothing in the hopes that the EMD is going to show up or whatever the situation might be. But in this case, we became very proactive for our client and went out and said, hey, where's your earnest deposit? We deserve to see that earnest deposit. You promised you would make it available within a certain time frame, and you haven't produced, right?
That's correct. And then that's when he started sending me all these other investors. Well, I could go with this investor and here's his loan. And I have this other investor if you want cash. And that's where my head started spinning. That's where I was like, oh man, this is deep and you're
Yeah.
in something you don't want to be in. And so I just started calling him out to timelines. And that's when he started to lose his battle, was because I stayed very diligent with him and he couldn't produce it. So that's when I talked to Don. We talked about time is of the essence. How do I move forward? So he did not produce those documents. Then he kept saying, I'll have it by 10 a.m. 10 a.m. came, he still didn't have it. And I wasn't giving him till 10 a.m., but he was begging for more time. And I just was being silent, just not answering him. And then by that morning around noon, once again, touch base with Don, and I sent over a termination due to breach of contract.
Eric, any final thoughts before we wrap this up? I think this has been a lot of information. And
A lot
hopefully
of information. Yeah, the main thing was that when the termination was sent over, we stated why, that the seller was in breach of contract, and that was the important issue. We wanted no one to be confused on why there was a termination. It was truly a termination because of breach of contract from the buyers, failure to perform, depositing the EMD within the time frame, within the purchase agreement dated blank for the following address. I mean, it's done. I mean, it's in you know, if then they try to come back and try to badmouth us, and then we fired back saying, hey, any other disparaging remarks, we met with and our attorneys defending us. So we put a halt to that. I mean, it's just
he posted a review, and I called Eric again. We spent a couple of days with Don and Eric there taking care of this. They have to love me right now, but they walked me through it. And so now I know how to walk others through it. And then we did, Eric gave me the language and he took the review down because he said, I'm going to go after you. And so it was not a good experience at all. When you see assignable, and that's why no matter what transaction is, we need to be getting the earnest money. We need to be getting the proof of funds so we know that our buyers are good. And it was just an experience I don't ever want to go again. So just to close up, so then we went through the proper steps to terminate that, accepted the first backup offer that my seller wanted. And then we moved forward with that. And then as soon I knew when that investor told all of his people, because my phone started blowing up with investors. So I just I had a backup offer. I just quit answering the phone because then they all called me directly and wanted that house.
And keep in mind, I want everybody to know this. I know that we've mentioned it before, but this is just a little peek behind the curtain into the back room of Five Star. These conversations go on very often. If we get a question from broker support, Eric and I, if we don't know the answer, we're going to contact our attorneys and get the very best answer possible. We're not attorneys. We do have a lot of experience, but there are always situations that are new to us as well. we're going to get you the best answer we possibly can, not just give you a quick and apparently easy answer. We're going to get the best answer for you. So
Yes.
thank you all for joining. We're wrapping up here. If you have any questions, post it in this link below and we will answer throughout the day. Again, thanks for joining. Thanks, Kim, Eric, and
Thank you
we'll see
both.
next
Yes.
week. Have a good
All
night.
right. See ya. Bye.
Sure.